All right, so I just did a video on this one line from Lisa TerKeurst. I hope I'm saying her name right. Forgiving what you can't forget. Again, this is not what the cover of the book looks like. I usually discard the covers because I'm not good with covers. It's just a hindrance rather than a help. So I want to continue on with this and read a little bit from here because I think it's really helpful for you to consider. So on page 106 at the very bottom, she says this, and she's talking about a friend that molested her. And I talked about how the Lord helped me to do a work based on some of the pains and hurt that I've experienced in childhood and adult life in a previous video. But I want to take it a little further here because it says, what he stole from me then wasn't just the innocence of beautiful imaginations and childhood simplicity. So consider what has stolen the innocence of beautiful imaginations from you and childhood simplicity. But let's go further. She says, he yanked me into a pit of fear I still have to fight to stay out of this day. Fear that I'm not worth being loved. Fear that other people will use me and then toss me aside. Fear that worst case scenarios will always happen to me. I knew this wasn't happening to my other friends, so why was it happening to me? Almost done. It says, the freedom to be a playful child got stolen. I learned to think like an adult to try to save myself. But the time the abuse stopped, the carefree girl I once was had been replaced by a cautious girl. And though I've experienced lots of counseling and healing, listen to this, I still find myself assuming the absolute worst might very well happen to me, and I'm constantly bracing for impact. Other people assume bad things will never happen to them, while I do the opposite. See, she understands here that based off of what happened to her at a moment in time that has long passed, that it still has an impact on her. It's still affecting her today by the way how she moves, by the way how she conducts herself. Does that resonate with you? That she's still operating in fear. She's still drumming up these worst case scenarios. She's still thinking that the worst will happen to her. She's still thinking that people will use her and toss her aside. She's always bracing for impact. How do you think that affects the way how she shows up in the world? How do you think that affects the way in which she interacts with others in her relationships, right? That has to alter it just a little bit. And to think about this, right? She may have many issues in her relationships, right? And really being able to have fruitful and healthy relationships. She may not understand why it's difficult for her to really develop intimacy with other people, to allow people in and to allow them to stay in and not just disregard them and dismiss them at the first offense. She may not understand why she's not able to maintain healthy relationships over an extended period of time for a long haul. Like, why are her relationships always seasonal, right? Or why is it difficult for her to establish relationships? Or maybe why she can't really benefit the fruit of really the relationships in its fullness, right? Some of us approach relationships with such trepidation, right? With such fear and hesitation and doubt. Am I bother them? Do I really want them to bother me? Like, there's all this baggage that we carry before we even say hello to another individual. And we got to be able to deal with that. See, she was able to start from childhood, identify something that happened in childhood and trace it into her adulthood. And it's something that we need to do. Either we can start from that point or we can start from where we're at right now. What is it that's keeping you from showing up in true authenticity? What is it that makes you don the costume? What are situations in which you feel like you cannot be your true self? What are those relational issues that you have? What would you like to have? And why don't you have that? And try to trace it back from where that comes from, where that stems from. See, in therapy, oftentimes therapists, they want to hear about your childhood. They want to go back to the beginning. And we like, nah, we good. I already done dealt with that. I already understand that. But what we don't realize is, even though childhood is past, the impact of it hasn't. See, it's so important to do the work, because the little boy, the little girl within is still hurting, is still confused, it still doesn't understand, is still left rejected and abandoned. You see, it just so happens that maybe the adolescent you, the adult you, said, you know what? I have to do something to protect you and shield you. So it created a persona so that people couldn't access that part of you, that people couldn't affect you in that way anymore. And what we have to understand is that is not enough, because there's still that inner child that's left unhealed. And the thing is that your adversary, the devil, is on the prowl looking for whom he can devour. So the minute you let your guard down, an individual has access to that inner child and could have to deal with that of you which is broken, unhealed, rejected, neglected, abandoned, hurt. And you're operating with them from that space. Now all of a sudden, this person is left with the responsibility to nurse the damage that you had at 8 years old, 12 years old, 6 years old. That's unfair to another individual. See, somebody is going to have to deal with that which is not healed. If you don't deal with it, somebody else is going to have to deal with it, because it's going to come out through your pores. It's going to come out through your language. It's going to come out through your actions. Don't leave other people to deal with what you will not face. Don't go through life thinking that the mask, the Band-Aid, the costume is an effective solution, because it's not. Because there is still a damaged child in there. So even as an adult, you loved someone with your whole heart. You really let somebody in. And it was really just that love like a child loves. If you were hurt in that situation and you recoiled and you just never dealt with the hurt of it, don't you know there's still a hurt woman in there, a hurt man in there, that if you don't deal with it, covering it up, ignoring it, moving past it, trying to act like it didn't matter, trying to act like you don't need it, trying to push it down, trying to suppress it, don't you know it will come out through your pores without permission with another? Deal with your issues so that another doesn't.